Can everyone see? All right. Well, I'm Haven Kiers. I am an associate professor in the landscape architecture program at University of California, Davis. And I am currently on sabbatical for the rest of this school year, which is very exciting. And, oh, that's okay.
Is it a yes or no, Nada?
Just say no.
Okay.
There we go. Back to it. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about my and to share the screen. All right, we're good. And I'm sure there'll be more. So this is, we'll roll with this. It's all about adaptation, which is what I'm going to be talking about, being adaptable. So today I am going to talk about nature heals, these 5 elements of restorative design, which is like me having a lot of fun with the acronym HEALS, which stands for health, engagement, aesthetics, labor, and sustainability. And these are the 5 principles that I think need to be brought into every design. All right. So this is me from a while ago, but I really don't have many pictures of me wearing a scientific coat, so we had to use this one. I call myself a designist. So I'm adjacent to science, and I love science so much, but I am really bad at it. I don't have the patience. I can't do the replications and the precision. I just like the big ideas, and I like taking all of the knowledge from science and sharing it through design. So my big question in sort of all of the research I do is how can science, design, and practice converge to inform the creation of accessible, multifunctional green spaces that maximize cultural and environmental values? Very fancy because I'm an academic, right? And that's how I need to present myself with the fancy question. But the reality is, what do I do? Engaging things we can do to connect people to the landscapes through demonstrations, gardens, spectacles. I love the spectacles, getting people excited about nature, not because they're supposed to be and not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's so much fun and it's just exciting to be there. So what I try and do is, accessible, equitable forms of self-care, stress management through nature. Nature heals. Talk about mental health through landscape program. Public health is a big part of it, but also through this heals thing, that's just like one component of it. But really, I do a lot of design on our campus and placemaking to try and create campus identity. And so that's part of what I want to do too, is how can you use design and nature to create a sense of place? So, I'm going to go through this part because we all know the craziness, right? But if you think about it, civilization has been designed to insulate us from the difficulties of nature, right? The whole housing and just staying away, tunnels that take us between buildings so that we don't have to get cold and windy, So, but through this development of technology and all of our computers and smartphones and all of that, we've cut ourselves off from what really sustains us and from the nature. And so we're not engaging with nature and we're not engaging with each other as we used to. And so what happens is, you've just read, I'm sure, all the epidemic of loneliness and the rise of stress and mental health, all of which got worse during COVID, but just tough times and kids, students just on their phones all the time, not having any real social connection, right? So what do? Right? More of, cell phones reflects how people relate to each other. And it really shows that more social media screen time leads to this depression that I was talking about, right? More face-to-face interactions will help improve that. How do we do that? Go outside. And so, yeah, as increase, all of this, we've heard about all of this, right? But so then it's well, what do we do? And how do we do this without the fear-based, oh my God, life is terrible, we need to do something because everything's falling apart? I don't like that. I want fun. So, nature heals. All right, so there we go with my 5: health, engagement, aesthetics, labor, and sustainability. Put in these 5 components and you've got an amazing design. All right, let's start by talking a little bit about health. So when I'm talking about health, it's not just like a lot of people talk about health and it's the physical health, right? It's like you need to go outside and go for a hike and, and be healthy and exercise and all of that. And that's a huge part of it for sure. But in addition, there is that mental health part of it. And how do you feel and who are you? And like, how do you get sort of that, I don't know, that sense of yourself, and like feeling like you're connected. And so mental health, social health as well, the connection with friends, but also thinking about it at three other levels in, yourself and individuals, but also the well-being of communities. And, and how do communities work together? And it's not just about the individual. And I think a lot of like school programs today and a lot of jobs, it's really focusing on what do you do as an individual and how can you rise above, when in reality it's about how can we work together and how do we create this community and create something that then can be resilient and can come back from tough times like COVID, like whatever craziness is going on with America right now. So that we can fight that. And then also thinking about the well-being of the environment. And so it seems like what I see is that it's one or the other, right? It's either we're just focusing on the environment and it's to the exclusion of people. And it's just like, let's restore and let's bring things back and make it exactly so it's this perfect thing, or it's all about the humans. And so when I learned about reconciliation ecology and this idea that people and wildlife could actually cohabitate together happily and that we could use our technology to help and that we could enjoy unbelievable. So cool. So how do we include that? And it's not just about me and what I want. It goes bigger to the community. It goes bigger to the ecological environment. All right. So again, what I've been doing too is because, academic and making this, I have, some of this stuff, and then I've got some quotes in here too from studies so that you know that I'm legit and I'm not just like talking. Because again, I love to talk and exaggerate, but I'm proving to you all of the studies to back it up. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but just spending time in nature helps improve, right? The loneliness that I was talking about, stress and anxiety, creativity, sharper thinking, just going outside, whether it's forest bathing, whether it's walking, just through a park, whether it's just sitting outside for 5 minutes between classes or, decompressing, it's going to help you. And so how do we sort of promote that without it being like, the nature prescription saying you need to go sit outside under a tree, which is really cool and great, but can we get better? Like, can we go outside because we want to, not because we're being told that it'll help us? So here are some of these things about the health benefits, right? So, college students, right? Under stress, views of plants increased positive feelings, reduced fear and anger. Just having plants around, right? Views of natural elements, less job pressure, more satisfied with their jobs. I spent a lot of my career looking at green roofs, and it was really interesting because the Ford plant in Detroit put a massive green roof over one of their factories. It was like 10 acres and it was the largest extensive green roof. And they did it, I'm sure it was greenwashing, and they did it because they could say they had the largest green roof. But the reality is that like the people who worked in that building started showing up and they stopped calling in sick and they were more satisfied with their jobs. And it was just, that wasn't even what they were going for. But just having that and being able to see changes on the roof, and maybe there was something that was nesting there, that kind of thing is what improves people's health and makes them feel better. So, we've got some other studies that talk about that, even interior plants to reduce stress. And so I've done a lot of work. I'm part of it's called Campus Nature RX. And so it's a community of campuses all across the United States, but they're also trying to expand. So if anyone is interested in joining, but the idea is what can we do on different campuses to improve this access and interest in nature? And so Cornell is one of the founders of the program. And so they just had these signs up all over the place, just kind of reminding people, oh, it was up. Did you know that spending time in nature can improve your sleep patterns? And then they've got all the studies, right? this is where I learned this, to make it totally legit. And oh, can it reduce overall stress levels? And it's beautiful. And we've got more studies if we want to learn more. You know, improve your social life. You can go fly fishing, right? All of this kind of thing. And so at Davis, we have something called Healthy UC Davis. And so it's a program across the university that really works on sort of mental and emotional well-being. And so using these concepts of nature RX, like the healing power of nature, to promote like healthy life skills and stress reduction, and you know, the importance of like finding time to go outside. And then basically documenting what are the different green spaces, how do people use them, what are places that are great for social interaction, what are places, where do you go to take a nap, where are there hammocks on campus, where are the, you know, the stress relieving areas, but also like, you know, my class built a sod couch, and that's like this now social area right in front of our building where people hang out and sit on the couch, you know? So like, what are those different spaces? And so as part of that, they created this Nature RX for faculty and staff, which has been really, really fun in that basically anyone, you know, who works on the university can sign up for an hour-long kind of class. And, you know, you can see these are some of them. So, you know, we'll do watercolors for an hour, and you can just sit and all of the materials are provided. Go into the botanical conservatory and make your own terrarium that you can take home and have as an indoor plant. You know, and it's free. It's just there, spending time outside with nature, integrating it into your life. And it's been a really fun experience for that. So that's the health side. Now we get into the engagement. And I mean, you can see, like, this is where I jump around and get excited because it's, and I'm already jumping around, but let's go with it. So, you know, this is, I kind of like this idea, right? And speaking to the importance of nature to humans, we must not fail to account for the nature of humans, that we are social. Like, we need to be with each other, and we want to be with each other. And so it's really important to think about how, you know, community, it's natural. And so, you know, nature is integral to the human experience. That is what we have evolved through, right? But we don't live in that anymore, where we're so now cloistered and protected and on our devices, and not necessarily, not needing, or well, needing, but not being able to spend as much time outside. And so part of this is also, you know, when we're connecting with our natural habitats, remember that we did it in groups. Right? Yes, there is time for the solitary moment in nature, but also like the fun and working together and just community of being outside. And so that, like, what I've been trying to do is create sort of this idea of human connection. If you've got that connection, if we can reduce that loneliness, if we can, you know, talk about a sense of belonging and create friendships, that's what we want to do, because that is going to create more health and well-being than just, yes, those moments of solitude in nature are fantastic, and you know I need them to recharge, but also doing that with a group and having that shared experience is really important. And so now we've got our quotes about engagement with nature, really talking about, like, you know, as you add more trees and grass into a common area, more people hang out there, and they want to hang out there. And so this is part of the work that I'm doing too in urban spaces and even suburban. No one really talks about suburban areas, but like that's the gold mine, you know, like going in there and really being able to add trees and create biodiversity, but do it in a way that encourages people to hang out and to like interact with their friends and neighbors is a key part, right? And so then, you know, you've got community gardens and neighbors, and they can grow their own food, and then they form their friendships, but also creating like views and access to great green space, create, you know, restore attention, relieve everyday pressures, you know, foster a sense of community. So where we can add these green spaces, and especially I've been on a kick lately about the importance of maintenance, and this fact that as designers, we so often just go in and we're like, we've done it, and then off we run. And then there's nothing. And we're landscape architects, and we're creating these living spaces that then we can't do anything about. And so part of it is like with the community aspect of maintenance, I think is so important, right? And then creating that sense of we built this together, or this is part of me, so I need to stay here to maintain it, to work on it, and having that sense of ownership within spaces that becomes long-term as you watch. So in addition to the faculty and staff NatureRx, since I think like 2013, have been teaching a first-year seminar that's called NatureRx. So it's for first year, it's for freshmen or first-year transfer students coming to UC Davis. And the idea is introducing them to places, the outdoor places on campus, and to the professors and staff that utilize them, right? And how do they use that on campus? And so this is literally one of my favorite classes that I've ever taught, because we just run around campus every day, we meet once a week for 2 hours, and we just go to a different place. And so like, we have a creek that runs along the edge of campus, and this is a seine, big net that you can pull. And so we'll get all of these fish and insects and critters, and the students get to wear waders. And half of them like just shocked. I mean, they spend the entire time being like, I can walk in the water and not get wet. And they're just like amazed by this. And they think it's the greatest thing. And we'll do land art, but we also, that's the tree bucket. So we'll connect with staff from the Arboretum, and they'll bring up the students in all the way up to the top so that they get these views of campus from above. And then we paired that, that day was like a macro and a micro. So we paired that with an entomologist who was showing us all of these tiny little insects down below. So we got multiple views of campus. And we've done, yoga at the student farm. One day we did square dancing at the student farm, which I thought was going to fail miserably because, a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds do not want to square dance with each other, but they loved it. They all got over that really uncomfortableness in the beginning, and then they were having the best time. So really just showing them, right? And so what are the main areas? Like, what makes this successful, right? Obviously, nature, being outside, but also engagement and giving them things to do outside. Like, I am really bad at, you'll see, I mean, that's why I'm like dancing. I'm not so good at just standing up and telling people what to think. I want them to be feeling it and exploring it and touching it, because that's where, making the terrariums, waiting, like looking at all of these different things, because I think that's how people learn. And I think and then they want to see how things have changed. And then they have, I keep saying ownership, but that the campus feels like it's theirs. And they want to bring people back. They want to show their friends what they found in these secret places that maybe not everyone knows. I mean, we'll show them little orange trees where they can harvest, oranges that no one knows about. And then they get all excited and tell their friends, and, things like that. Student farm that, I didn't know existed at Davis for the first 7 years I lived there. So now I'm telling everyone. And so the goal of it then within design is like, how do you create then these spaces that are accessible to visitors, and also for members of the community? So it's not just about, it's not just for the students, it's not just like the individual, but it's like creating spaces on campus. So this is our courtyard in the landscape architecture building. And so I also teach a design build class, and every year we just add something new to the courtyard, and the students get to design. I mean, the idea here was that this was like a green roof table, so they've got plants going in there and gabion, and we've got rain gardens, and we did, the places for the hammocks, and all of that. We've got green roofs and overhead runnels and so much fun. But it's a space that anyone, like, if they discover it, they feel like it's theirs. It's the secret place that they found. And then people from all over, not just the landscape architecture department, will come and just hang out there. Okay, so then that brings us to aesthetics, because all of this is well and good, but we still have to think about the people and what people like. And that's the hardest part, because when we talk about like sustainability and ecology, it can be messy, and we want things to be biodiverse, but there's still this, how do we balance? And so, if you think about sort of like our typical pastoral landscape, I've got Frederick Law Olmsted in here talking about, grass and meadows. And then I added the sheep because we're in New Zealand, and I'll talk about sheep too. Don't you worry. That's why I'm in New Zealand. Right? And men and women sitting here in groups in the shade, right? This is kind of the aesthetic that we've been taught to enjoy. So it's kind of like, how do we incorporate that so that we're not just saying, oh no, you have to change your mind because we only want biodiversity, we only want things to look natural. Like, as a landscape architect, I still want to create places that people want to be in. So it's like finding that balance between getting that biodiversity that we really want and like promoting that ecology, but also creating places that people want to hang out in. And so, this talks about when people see nature, they get excited, and attractive natural areas. Like, I like this one, right? Aesthetically attractive natural areas are important for motivating public support for conservation. And they're the most common starting points for conservation efforts, right? We can get there and we can do the conservation and we can restore areas, but let's start not by just showing like this messy thing and say, this is what you want. Let's start by showing we can do biodiversity, but we can do it in a front yard and it can be beautiful. And then there are other areas where we can go to the conservation, but getting people excited, getting people to go in their front yards and look for the insects and the little critters and like see how they grow and watch as the plants grow and that sort of thing. I think that then becomes this gateway. So, one of the things like that I've been doing, again, because I'm science adjacent, is this idea of designed experiments, where it's actually, I'm working with a scientist to, quantify some of these benefits, looking at, like, for example, this is a green roof, and we're looking at whether you can use grassland species on green roofs and how they do, native grassland species, which typically have massive, deep roots. And will they adjust to a green roof setting? And do they bring in the insects? But doing it in a way where it's still beautiful and people are excited. And this is a great way to do things in urban areas where, yes, you're not going to get that perfect, precise science, but you can get a lot of information still. And, right, so it's all about multifunctionality, and you can create something that people really like and are engaged in and excited about. So, front lawn conversions, big deal. Everyone's talking about getting rid of the lawn and turning it into a garden. And so this idea of chic sustainability. And yes, this is my house. But taking that lawn and then turning it into something that is just, I'm all about colors and bright and like, and this is like, pow, in your face. And I've got some native plants in there. I've got some not. Great pollinator garden. And just like how you get people, you see that before and after, and you're kind of excited. Like, what can we do? And so more pictures there, just showing all of that color and excitement as you go by the lawn. But at the same time, this is my idea. This is the idea of the mullet garden, right? So front yard, that's my calling card. Landscape architect, designer, see my modern lines and my things. In the back, that's where I'm trying everything. I want to use one of every plant because I can't resist. When I go somewhere, I want that plant. I want to throw it in the back. I want to test out, a doghouse with a green roof and a little mini wall. And I want to have, the crazy sunflowers and all of this stuff. I mean, this was during COVID. And of course we had our COVID trampoline because that's what people did. Destroyed the lawn, put in, some other vegetation after that. But yeah, this idea where you can, and then I also love talking about the tuck-away plants, where these are the plants that are so good, and they're the natives that you love, and they bring in the best insects or whatever, they're co-evolved. I'm like, let's just tuck them away. They don't have to be front and center. They can be there, they can be used, they can connect to the front, they can, be part of a greater corridor, but they're just over there by the air conditioner. It's okay. No one needs to see this leggy, kind of ugly thing sometimes. So we embrace it, we take it, we use it, we experiment, we test, we fail so many times, and then we see what works. And, we don't have to put the ugly plants in front. Okay, and then labor. So I was mentioning a little bit about this too, and really the importance of maintenance and stewardship and understanding like all of these things and how important they are. So like I said, I teach this design build studio. A huge part of it is talking about, so these are all of the different things, you know, that we've built. A huge part of it is teaching the students from the beginning the importance of designing for maintenance. And so from the beginning, we bring in people from grounds and landscape services. We bring in the people who actually do the maintenance and have them tell us, you know, oh, that little, you know, your beautiful thing where it's all pavement with just this tiny square of grass in the center, you know, that looks so elegant. No, because how are you going to mow this little like 3 by 3 meter patch in the middle of concrete? And how much of it, you know, effort is it to bring the little mower in to get that, you know, things like that. Or some of these putting shrubs too close to the path because, you know, we don't think about how they're going to spill out. And some people really don't like spilling outage and then cut through and it's really a sad thing. But so bringing that in and thinking about that from the beginning, what are the issues? What works? What doesn't? What are some of, I mean, I've since learned like what the sort of cast iron plants for campus are. And they've been changing and evolving, but you know, these are their tried and true that they're like, okay, if this is in a really tough space, let's do that. And then they're open to saying, let's try some of these others, let's add some natives, let's do that. But we've got sort of a backbone that we know works and doing that. So really thinking about not just the design, but who is maintaining it and how and what works and what doesn't. So this is, you know, it's all about experiential learning. And we're literally out there. And Fern was out there, and I have pictures of her with power tools showing how to do this. But the idea is teaching students about, you know, process, materials, and methods of construction to give them that hands-on experience. If like, not to make them experts, but if nothing else, just to make them understand what a skilled craft construction and maintenance actually is. You know, I mean, we talk about maintenance and it's mow and blow is what we say in the US, you know, and really like you need a good horticulturist. It's gardening. It's like if you want these gardens, these spaces to live and be alive and be, you know, ecologically robust, you can't just have someone, you know, with their blower and cutting everything back and their hedge trimmer. So really getting that from an early starting point within design, thinking about, okay, what is the long term? And so I actually do, you know, in my studios, I will make students, I'll be like, okay, we're going to take a break and we're all going to go outside and weed. They don't like that, but we do it. And the first class in the design build is maintenance of the courtyard. I mean, we are cutting everything back. We are weeding. We are out there so that they get a sense. And if people want a recommendation from me for grad school, they have to agree to do an hour of weeding. So, you know, and I'll have meetings out in the courtyard and we call them weeding meetings. And that's what we do, you know, like, let's just get this is part of what we do and how it works because we're supporting our space that we love. You know, so this is this idea of photographed and forgotten is, I think, is really prevalent in landscape architecture, where you're there, you make this beautiful design, you wait, you know, you've got a contractor who installs it, and then typically, at least, you know, where in California, is responsible for the first year to sort of make sure that it does okay. And then you take the photos, right? And it's beautiful and glorious and everything looks good. And then everyone walks away and it's like, you know, this is this green roof on the Lottery building in Sacramento, California, that won, I mean, it was certified like LEED Platinum and it won all these awards. And as soon as, you know, its year contract expired, the head of the building was just like, we don't have any funds, we're done. You know, and I have a picture of like a sad little geranium that someone planted out there because these are all office windows that look out onto this. And it's just like, it's just, you know, and they're trying, but they're like, no, we're done. We got our certification. Like, we don't have the funding. We didn't plan for the funding. And so, yeah. So really thinking about, right, maintenance costs and budgets, planning for the fact that plants grow, having a maintenance plan from the beginning. And, you know, this is the other thing that's happening all over, is this idea of rock mulch. And if we just put gravel everywhere, then we won't have any weeds and it'll be amazing. And it's just like destroying the soil and the fabric. And it's just, yeah. And you still get the weeds coming up. And so then you have to spray the weeds. and it's all very sad. So thinking about that. So this is actually something that I'm working on right now, is this idea of biodiversity and maintenance in large scale public spaces. So really thinking about, if we know that like ecologically robust and biodiverse parks and urban areas are so important and so good, why aren't we doing them? Why don't we see them? And what are the barriers to that? And what is it? Budget? Is it lack of training? Is it, you know, the aesthetic barrier that people are like, oh no, too messy, right? So that's what I'm working on, and I'm having so much fun just focusing on the maintenance side of things and really like learning about, you know, what people think and what works, and then finding all of these really fun techniques that, you know, improve sustainability and improve, you know, the ecology of a site and biodiversity that may be sort of under the radar. So I'm working on something called the Upkeep Catalog, which will have all of these different kind of ideas that I've found from other people, and like, these are things that you can think about. So benefits of labor in nature, right? If you garden, it's really good for women 50 and older, better than those who jogged, you know, lower risk of dementia, all of these good things, right? Recover from breast cancer more quickly if they spend time from surgery, if they spend time in a garden, like all of these good things, just showing also that spending time and not everyone is so obsessed with a maintenance free. Like, I want a low maintenance garden, I want a no maintenance garden, which like is ridiculous. And the fact that landscape architects are like, oh yeah, no maintenance, we can do that. Like, no, you know, you have to. And so how do we get people to really want to also be in their garden and watch it and be part of it and maintain it? And so, yeah, this is another one, right? That just people who do environmental outdoor work half as likely as non-volunteers to show depressive symptoms after 20 years, while the people who did other forms of volunteering only had their risk lowered a little bit, right? So it's, yay, we volunteer, but if we volunteer outside environmentally, so much better off. Okay, so going into sustainability, and I use sustainability as this super broad term that includes all of, you know, ecological, biodiversity, all of that kind of thing. But the idea is, right, this is still a designed landscape, right? I am not a designer. I'm not like, I don't do restoration. I still am doing like urban designed areas, right? So how do we do that to promote sustainability and biodiversity and create habitat in these human dominated systems, ecosystems, you know, and how do we do it so that it's really pretty and people want to hang out? Right, so, right, everyone's, you know, support diversity. Well, I'm promoting biodiversity, and just all of these ways, like, you know, once I am all about the idea of, I don't know, like a fun fact, or I like to think about it as cocktail party talk. If I have like this fun little tidbit that I can share with people, and cocktail party talk makes it sound like I'm out and about at cocktail parties, and I'm so not that social, but I like to pretend again. So just imagine me in a cocktail dress sharing these tidbits. You know, I mean, things like the pipevine swallowtail. That's the pipevine swallowtail caterpillar that needs to eat the California pipevine in order to become the butterfly, right? They've co-evolved. The plant and the caterpillar have co-evolved. That's where the butterflies lay their eggs. If you don't have it, very difficult, right? It's a super cool plant. It's got this little like pipe thing, and it's so much fun. There's another bee that cuts out perfect little circles, the leaf cutter bee, perfect circles out of leaves. And so when you find one of these leaves, it's like the coolest thing ever, because there's just like circle, circle, circle polka dots all over it. And you tell someone that, and then they're going to go out in their garden and start looking for it. You know, I mean, things, just all sorts of fun things, and talking about native bees and ones that are ground nesting bees, and keeping spaces open for them so that you can try and find these areas, right? I mean, things like that, or just bringing in birds, right? You can start with the sexy, because a lot of it is the birds, the butterflies, you know, hummingbirds. People get excited about that. And, you know, use broad terms like pollinators. But then you can get into all of these fun little, really cool stories. You know, I was talking about the entomologist that came to my Nature RX seminar. And he got his PhD in entomology at UC Davis. His lab was hired by a Japanese movie crew to come up with stories for their movies because of all of these insects that, would like cut themselves, like make their nests within the bodies of things and then cut themselves out and, just crazy, and eat their parents, and, all of these stories that they're like, we need new horror stories. And so they hired an entomology lab. Like, I love that. And I want to tell, all of those kind of things. And I feel like once people have those tidbits, then they start to get more engaged. So, more pictures of the courtyard. This is the sod couch that I was telling you about, which is so much fun, just out in front. And then we've planted bulbs in it. And so, like, right about now, all of these like tete-a-tete narcissus are coming up. And then I've got wild native annuals that all come up along the edge. And so we get those. And it's just fun, like in front of the landscape architecture building. So we know the sustainability benefits, right? Trees are great. We can reduce noise pollution, all of these things, filter rainwater, like all of that good stuff. But, people have heard it. So how do we come at it from a new angle? So, right, idea, we've got our issues, we've got our design solutions that we want to, and then we're reducing all of these things. So what I want to do now quickly in the last like 15, 20 minutes I have is tell you about one of my projects that kind of, and do that through the HEALS kind of framework. So in 2021, like kind of at the height of COVID, I started a program called the UC Davis Sheep Mowers. And what we do, we're an ag school. And so through the vet program, we have a vet school, we have a really strong animal science school. And so we have on campus, just slightly off campus, but technically on campus, a sheep barn with 400 sheep, different sheep. And so I had read about how in, all of these places, they're using sheep to mow lawns. And I was like, oh my God. And I actually heard about how they were doing it under the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And I was like, that's the sexiest thing I've ever heard. Like, I love this, it's the Eiffel Tower and it's sheep and it's sustainability. And of course I want to see this. And so for years when I was working on campus at the Arboretum, I was like, we need to do this. It's perfect. We're in ag school. And, and they'd like pat me on the head and be like, that's really sweet. And then I became a professor and it was research. And they're like, oh, you need to bring the sheep on campus? Yes, research. I'm like, yes, it's research. So now I get to take 25 sheep at a time and I bring them into Central Campus and we do it for 3 days in a row and we just let the sheep mow an area. And so I started off with putting up like snow fencing and having to install it all. Fine, now I just rent fencing and it's lovely because it's easier and makes my life easier. And I had an internship and basically my interns were only putting up fences and taking them down and it was miserable. So I bring them out, the sheep mow the lawn, and we look at, the operational benefits of, this different type of labor. We look at the ecological benefits, and then we look at the cultural and social benefits. Is the research program. And so you can see, right, sheep mowing HEALS. We've got our health, engagement, aesthetics, labor, and sustainability. And I have plants here. So you can see Lauren is wearing a t-shirt that shows that. I come prepared across the world to New Zealand with plants. So yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the program. So UC Davis Sheep Mowers, this is something that was done sheep for years, right? And so looking specifically at grassy areas, in Kensington Gardens, at Central Park and Prospect Park in New York. So Frederick Law Olmsted, father of American landscape architecture, designed Central Park to be mowed by sheep. And there are some, I don't have the photo, but there are amazing photos of the sheep and then men and women wandering with them, and carrying umbrellas and in their dresses, and the sheep are there, and just unbelievable. And also mowed in front of the White House. And so this was during the First World War, and all of the men were off fighting, lack of labor, so they brought the sheep, and then they also sheared the sheep and then sold the wool to raise more funds. I mean, so good. We need to do this. And so, and then I've got my quote again, talking about the importance of service preceding art, right? So all of these things under, the trees and flowers under which there's not a purpose of direct utility or service are inartistic, if not barbarous, right? So considerations of utility are neglected or overridden by considerations of ornament, there will not be true art, right? So let's do this multifunctionality. We can cut the lawn, we can do these things, but we can do it in this beautiful, pastoral, wonderful way. So just an overview of the sheep mowers. We started out in a very far corner. They said, yes, it's Central Campus. It was the farthest thing away from Central Campus imaginable. And, our first fencing was the plastic stuff, and it blew away in the wind, and it was awful. But we brought out chairs, and we brought out umbrellas, and we tried to turn it into a thing that people would want to come and check out. So we, looking at the 5 pillars, the framework. So with health, really focused on, promoting mental health and well-being, reducing stress, and improving mood. So, we partnered with Aggie Mental Health, and they would come out. They were a group of students from the public health. And so they would have their booth and we'd have ours, and we, talk about the value of spending time in nature. We've actually gone out to the local high school, and we just set a date. We're going again May 6th, where we go to the high school, and I'm not allowed to take the Davis sheep off campus, so we borrow the Future Farmers of America high school sheep for the event, and so that's why it's the Friends of the UC Davis sheep mowers, and we just bring them out to the quad of the high school and let people come, and we do events like watercoloring. But this is where, I got my paper out of it, where it was really this idea of, what is the psychological effects of urban sheep grazing on college campuses? And this was my favorite part of the study. So we, when you're at IKEA or the supermarket and it's hit the smiley face, how satisfied are you? So we did that, but we did it in the same location when the sheep were there and then when the sheep weren't there, the same time. Just saying, how do you feel right now? I mean, it was literally on a phone being look at these smiley faces, show us how you feel. And so, I mean, you see kind of the happiness, it's the same. They're all kind of do. But when the sheep were present, suddenly it was wow, they're super happy when the sheep were present. Here, they're I mean, it was just this ultimate, they were so much happy. It just brought this joy and exuberance. And and then we would get all these comments about, oh my God, it's so Davis. And people would ride their bikes by and just come to a screeching halt and be what is this? And, and just get excited about, they're we're in ag school. Of course we have sheep lawn mowers. This is what we do. And so we really try and make it into, I love using the word spectacle, to make it so that it's not, the sheep are cool, and that in and of itself is really fun, but also how can we coordinate? So we'll do grad photos with the sheep, and we'll invite, the graduates to come out. We have coloring pages. We do felting with the sheep. So we give them all the materials and they can needle felt their own sheep. We do watercolors with the sheep where we give them the materials. We brought in a native plant mobile nursery, and we're selling plants and sheep and doing seed things, with. And so the idea is just you can learn about the sheep, you can learn about the benefits, you could just sit in a chair and relax under an umbrella and take a nap, or you can engage and meet people. And we found that people actually make friends at this event and have met other people and bring more people back, right? So there's a lot of this. We've done, mobiles. We celebrated Frederick Law Olmsted's 200th birthday. That's the mobile nursery, and interactive, where we're okay, design your own sheep mower sticker, or what's your favorite name for a sheep? Draw something. And so again, people, but without the pressure, they can come up, this is just on an easel, they can come up and draw if they want to, they don't have to. There's no, there's no awkwardness about it. Like that's the worst for me. I hate the forced interactions. Like icebreakers make me cringe. Like I don't want to be forced into a friendship with someone and get to know them that way. I want it to be natural and like just kind of happen because we're both drawing like cute little sheep. And so we have an Instagram at UC Davis _sheep mowers. And it's just fun, right? It's just a way to get people. We'll tell them when the sheep are going to be out. We do all sorts of fun things. We've actually spray painted the sheep. We did poetry with sheep, where we spray painted the sheep with stencils, and all of the words were words and phrases related to climate change. And the idea was that it was like the refrigerator poetry, where however, based on how the sheep were standing in groups, we asked people to compose their own poems about climate change. And then we actually took that and turned that into a mural design contest. And so now we've got a mural that's going to go up on a public building. I think I've got a picture coming up. Based on the climate poetry and a mural design. But so this just shows, right, this is where we started. And then this is where we were in spring of 2025. So last spring, we made it to, Main Green, Central Quad, where like, the grounds people were like, you will never get the quad. And I just kept showing up and being like, this year? Can I do it? Can I do it? And finally they're like, fine, you can have the quad. So now we get the quad and it's like right there and everyone goes rushing by and it's really fun. But part of it is what I was saying about this, the aesthetics of that beauty and site identity, right? And creating, it's like, yes, let's embrace the fact that we're a land grant university. Let's embrace the fact that it's an ag school. Everyone makes fun of Davis as, it's the ag school. But like, it's fantastic, right? The ag schools are the best. And so like, let's celebrate the fact that we can bring sheep on campus and that we've got them and that we can integrate them into our campus life and that we can do, this was, the sheep were invited to some sort of fundraiser. And so they got to, wear their little handkerchiefs and join this fundraising fancy party, and then all the photos, it just then becomes integrated within campus. We've been featured in like the campus, like the UC Davis video card for Christmas, an actual card. Like we get to all of the campus tours now, like we make sure that we move around campus, and all of the spots are on campus tours. And so the tour guides now know what to say and talk about the sheep mowers and bring people through, and so it's becoming woven into the identity of Davis and creating this campus space that then people are excited about and want to come back and check on and that sort of thing. So this is the building that we're doing the mural on. And so that's kind of fun. We were supposed to do it right before I left, but we got rained out. So April 16th and 17th. So you can say, well, we're supposed to do it years before that. But it took a little while to raise some money. And then the labor, really thinking about innovative management operations. We measured the grass every single time that the sheep went out there. Like, do they cut the grass as well as lawn mowers? We compared soil samples from non-mowed, like regularly mown by lawn mowers versus the samples from the area where the sheep were. And, really thinking about this idea of, no, we're not going to replace, initially Grounds was like, oh, are you trying to replace us and like have them mow every lawn? And we're like, no, that's not the point. Like ours is still pretty much a demonstration project. We're not saving any like lawns or any cutting off labor. But the idea is, right, we play off the sheep versus lawnmowers. We actually went down to a suburb in the Bay Area around San Francisco for Earth Day, and we had a contest between the sheep and an electric lawnmower, and we had sheep versus lawnmowers, and then people voted on who won, and obviously we won. So much cooler than the electric lawnmower. But yeah, like playing off of that and the sheep versus lawnmowers. But this is where I think there really is an opportunity, right? Yes, we will, the Davis campus is not going to be entirely mown by sheep. But what in some of these places, like within vineyards, underneath, agrivoltaics, riparian areas, steep slopes is a great place for the sheep to come in. Like places where it's difficult to get the typical equipment, fire management is huge, especially out, in California, like the wildland urban interface. Bring the sheep out there to cut things back, right? Like how can we use them in a smart way to do these kind of things and to make the labor easier and also, reduce carbon emissions and, all of that good stuff. This is just my favorite example of this specialized mowing project. So this is the contained research facility. And so this holds all of the plants with like nasty like viruses and pests and all of this crazy stuff that you don't want. Like you have to put on a specialized suit before you step inside, like cool sort of things like that. Anyway, they did not want regular lawnmowers up there because it's a greenhouse. And if the lawnmowers kicked up a rock and broke the window, pests and awful things out in the environment. So they said, can you bring the sheep? So for 3 days, we brought the sheep out. They cut back the lawn. This is not an area where it needs to be like perfectly manicured. And we got to, do something where it really was absolutely important to have the sheep there. And so, right, we're looking at this ecological sustainability, right? Within our sustainability part of the HEALS, right? Improving soil nutrition, increasing ecological biodiversity, trying to reduce herbicides, reducing carbon emissions. This is the part that is like the hardest for me because I've found a lot of people are enthusiastic, but actually partnering to get that. Again, I'm not the scientist. And so like, I have all these soil samples that I'll like send off and then I get these results and I'm like, yay, I don't know what to do with them. So that's where I'm like, okay, I need to focus on the cultural stuff. I need to partner with the experts to get the ecological stuff and then pull it all together for this, multifunctional, how it just covers so many cool different benefits. I mentioned that I've got an internship and my students are the best. We have a very robust merch sort of sales. Everything we do, all of our clothing, we buy t-shirts from thrift stores, Goodwill. We just buy plain t-shirts, buy them by the pound, and then hand screen print everything. And so, it's recycling and doing that sort of thing so that we're not just like, creating brand new $40 t-shirts that we're putting out in the world. So everything is like nice and soft and very good. We'll also do a lot of wool recycling. I need to replace that picture because I am actually, as of last spring, a certified sheep shearer, which was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but I loved it so much. And I was trained in the New Zealand method. So I'd like, so much fun, so hard, and the coolest thing ever. But it's very fun. Like we use the wool. I've taken some of this wool and we have a local mill in the town near us. And so we've turned that into roving. We've had it processed into roving and then we use that when we do the needle felting. And so we'll use sheep mowers wool for the needle felting. I also UC Davis just started a new sustainable fashion institute. And so we're partnering with them to bring some of the this waste wool. Like our sheep are not wool sheep at all. It's not great stuff. But to see what we can, they want to use some of it to see what they can do. And then we always bring in people. So we learned how to do some of the skirting, and then we bring in people to do spinning on site when we've got the sheep out there. You can see, again, the evolution of the fencing. That was the fence that the students had to put in with T-posts. And then we've got our fancy white ones. And this is my new favorite is there's a woman 2 towns away who actually uses the waste wool to create fertilizer pellets. So she has a pelletizer. And so we were able to bring our waste wool there. And so we have sheep mowers, fertilizer pellets, which is really, really fun. And they add, like, it's all sorts of, and then I'm learning more and more about using just waste wool as mulch and protection from slugs and snails, and just putting it in pots and having, really, like, what are all of these amazing ways to use wool? So with that, I will close on nature heals, sheep mowing heals. Thank you all.